Dave and Rebecca Brown, a married couple of 12 years, participated in their initial court-ordered three-way consultation for an hour and a half. Dave's presence was solely due to his lawyer's insistence. Post-nuptial agreements were a relatively new concept in the legal system, and Dave's lawyer wanted to ensure that all necessary precautions were taken. During the previous 90 minutes, the consultant primarily engaged in conversation with Rebecca, while Dave sat attentively with a notepad and pen, his lips pursed. Occasionally, he would jot down notes in his notebook. Rebecca's pleas deeply touched the seasoned counselor, Jenny, who was also impressed by Rebecca's willingness to accept full responsibility, alleviating any concerns Dave may have had about his own shortcomings leading to her infidelity. Rebecca refrained from resorting to the typical excuses often heard in similar situations, which Jenny appreciated. It was Jenny who had recommended this approach during their solo session 3 days prior. Eventually, Rebecca fell silent, and the room was filled only with the faint ticking of the analog clock on the adjacent wall and the sound of Dave taking notes on his knee. Jenny allowed the silence to linger, as she had learned from experience that most individuals prefer to fill uncomfortable gaps in conversation. After a minute, Jenny glanced at Rebecca, who seemed poised to speak. Jenny subtly shook her head, prompting Rebecca to close her mouth. Jenny decided to give Dave 1 more minute. If he remained silent, she planned to suggest that Dave genuinely consider the emotional turmoil his remorseful wife was experiencing and educate him on the general statistics that disprove the notion of once a cheater, always a cheater. Those who are caught cheating and witness the devastation it causes to their loved ones often become incredibly loyal. She patiently waited. Dave stirred, a faint smile playing on his face. All right, Jenny thought, and a half-smile formed on the corners of her mouth. Rebecca's performance was commendable, earning her a solid 9 out of 10. However, Jenny's smile vanished, leaving her feeling embarrassed. The expression on Rebecca's face indicated that she too was embarrassed. Jenny quickly regained her composure and addressed Mr. Brown, reminding him that there was no need for rudeness. She emphasized that his wife had bared her deepest vulnerabilities. As he was aware, Jenny had privately met with her earlier in the week, and it was evident that she was truly humiliated by her actions and devastated by the pain she had caused him. As she confessed today, her colleague had been a skilled seducer, and she had struggled to resist his advances. Jenny assured Mr. Brown that, with both of their consent, she could work with his wife to empower her and equip her with the knowledge to ensure that such a mistake would never happen again. Dave let out a sigh. There is a saying that goes, "You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink." I hope you don't mean to imply, Mr. Brown, that your wife is incapable of learning to protect herself and your feelings in the future. Not at all, Miss Parkinson. I was merely curious about your educational background. How many years did you study at university? Actually, I studied for 6 years and completed my master's degree. 6 years? Impressive. So you must have learned everything there is to know. Damn it. Dave felt offended. Jenny straightened up and firmly addressed Mr. Brown, stating that his comment was rude and completely inappropriate. Don't you agree? Anticipating further objections, Dave retrieved an electronic device from his pocket and pressed a button. Rebecca's voice emerged from the device, pleading for forgiveness. She admitted that her actions were a one-time mistake and assured Dave that he could trust her. They listened as she expressed remorse for the pain she had caused him and how deeply hurt she was to witness his suffering. Suddenly, Jenny's voice interrupted loudly, filled with indignation. Do you comprehend the extent of the unpleasantness and inappropriateness of recording our session? It is not only unpleasant, but I firmly believe that it is completely illegal in this state to record someone without their approval and consent. I have no intention of condoning such behavior. However, it seems that Margaret has given her consent, making it acceptable in this particular instance. Jenny was too furious and humiliated to notice that Rebecca had just lowered her chin to her chest and was successfully mimicking a beetroot. Jenny couldn't recall a time when she had felt more offended. Who on earth is Margaret? She was our consultant 2 years ago when I last caught Rebecca cheating. It was recorded back then. My wife is quite the convincing deceiver, isn't she? She certainly fooled me at that time. That's for sure. Rebecca continued to gaze at the floor, her eyes fixed on her feet. Dave observed with satisfaction as he and Jenny engaged in a silent competition to see who could blush the most intensely. Annoyed, Jenny contemplated how thoroughly she had been deceived by the experienced cheater. Perhaps her embarrassment was somewhat alleviated by the realization that the reason Rebecca was such a convincing liar was because the first person she managed to deceive with her lies was herself. Dave seized the opportunity presented by the embarrassed silence of both women to put an end to this charade. Just so there is no ambiguity, Rebecca, I will fully abide by the terms of the marriage agreement you signed 2 years ago. This means that you will leave my house with only your personal belongings while leaving behind all the jewelry that I purchased for you, including the 2 rings you are currently wearing. Dave paused, allowing himself to savor the satisfaction of his previous statement. In a way, I suppose I should express gratitude to you. If I had divorced you 2 years ago, the courts would have granted you half of everything, and now you will receive nothing. The only cost was that I had to swallow my pride for a while. Don't worry, you didn't hurt me too much this time. Despite what a good counselor might say, deep down I think I always knew you would cheat again. Rebecca remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of the punishment and loss she was experiencing. Jenny, feeling embarrassed by her own naivety, was taken aback by Dave's cold and indifferent behavior. It became evident that he truly lacked any emotional attachment, or perhaps he was simply a masterful actor, surpassing even his wife in this regard. Both women remained silent as Dave, the offended husband, continued to speak. Dave declared that within 24 hours he would pack up Rebecca's belongings and remove her from their shared space. He expressed his indifference towards her future whereabouts and actions, making it clear that he did not care. He warned her not to attempt rallying their family and friends against him, as he possessed video evidence of her affair that would be shared with everyone she knew. Dave paused momentarily, attempting to control his rising anger. Once the divorce was finalized, he mentioned the possibility of discussing Rebecca's visitation rights with their daughter, Alice. If she agreed to sign the divorce papers promptly, he promised to be generous in this matter. However, if she resisted, he threatened to sever her relationship with their daughter entirely. Jenny's attention was immediately captured by these words, while Rebecca's head snapped up, a mixture of fear and anger flashing in her eyes. Jenny had noticed that Rebecca had never mentioned her daughter during their individual or joint therapy sessions. At the time, Rebecca had appeared to be a typical self-centered individual, solely focused on what she stood to lose, disregarding everything else. Jenny observed the pain etched on Rebecca's face as she finally found the words to express herself. She pleaded with Dave, stating that he couldn't take her little girl away from her as she desperately needed her. The unbearable agony caused by her soon-to-be ex-husband's words was evident in the contorted features of Rebecca's face. Jenny pondered if only these individuals had considered the potential repercussions of their actions before engaging in their various unlawful acts. I would no longer have a job. She extended her hand and gently placed it on Rebecca's, hoping to provide some solace and prevent her from completely breaking down. Having demonstrated his emotional detachment in the eyes of the consultant, Dave spoke in a composed manner. Perhaps you should have contemplated this before you were, as they say, enticed by an expert. All of this is clearly outlined in the contract. It explicitly states that if you make another mistake, you will lose everything, including custody of Alice. However, she needs me. Nonsense, Rebecca. She is 13 years old. I will fulfill all of her needs just as well as you. Besides, this is not the appropriate setting to air our personal issues. You betrayed me. I forgave you. After our wedding, you signed a contract and vowed never to stray again. I had my suspicions, conducted an investigation, and once again caught you behaving foolishly. If you cannot handle the consequences, then refrain from committing a crime. Isn't that what they say? Dave rose to his feet and gazed down at his soon-to-be ex-wife, who was now kneeling on the floor, her hands clasped in supplication, tears streaming down her face. The anguish evident on her countenance conveyed to everyone in the room that, perhaps for the first time throughout this entire sordid affair, she genuinely felt remorse. The ramifications of her impulsive actions were finally becoming apparent. Summoning her last ounce of strength, Rebecca made a brief dash. "You will not take my Alice. I will fight you every step of the way." The consultant stood as a helpless witness to the smirk that materialized on Dave's face. "Please go ahead, you promiscuous woman. My attorney assured me that this agreement is ironclad, and it will provide me with the justification I need to release my incriminating videos. Attempt to show your face in public after they are made public, Rebecca." With these words, the offended husband exited the room. Jenny glanced at the devastated woman and let out a sigh. She must commence immediately if she desires to avert a complete mental breakdown in this situation, particularly if the aforementioned agreement is upheld in her husband's favor. Following the wedding, having her daughter taken away from her must be every mother's worst nightmare. She leaned towards the weeping woman. Dave Brown remained in his car until the adrenaline subsided and his breathing returned to normal. Then he drove home, passing by the supermarket and liquor store, purchasing a bottle of bourbon for himself and a delicious piece of fish for their dinner. Salmon was Alice's preferred choice. Tonight marked the beginning of a new chapter in their life together. What he accomplished tonight held great significance. Pausing with his hand on the front door handle, he was determined to adhere to his usual routine as much as possible for Alice's sake. Pushing open the door, Dave Brown spoke in a loud voice, fully aware of Alice's declining hearing. Alice, an elderly terrier dog, jumped out of its basket and wagged its tail so vigorously that its hind paws skidded on the floorboards as it came to greet its owner. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so that your second chef doesn't deceive you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because the upcoming tale surpasses this one. If you are under 18, do not even contemplate listening to the following one.